The Bad Guys, though, I didn't really know what to think of it going in because I never heard of the comic series. It is based off a comic series. And the movie too, I think, is in collaboration with a French studio too, but it's a DreamWorks, and the director's French, Pierre Perifel, which is a butchered American pronunciation, most certainly, but it's based off a comic series by Aaron Blabey, who's Australian. That's what I was thinking of. He's an Australian writer, so it's an Australian comic series. I didn't know what to expect with this thing going into it. And it's DreamWorks. And I remember we commented on the show very offhandedly, but I remember Joe and I mentioned it on the show. I said the only thing that worries me is the animation looks unfinished. Like in the trailer, I said the animation looks weird. Like it doesn't look. It looks like it needed another render.
It reminded me of Into the Spider-Verse's animation from the trailers, where it's like, this looks unique and cool, but why does it look like it's not finished yet? But then once you actually, and I'm going to jump the gun here, but once you actually see the movie, you're like, oh, it's the style. Duh. I just been so pounded in the head over Pixar style and everything else that I forgot there's other styles of animation.
It's partly that, but it's also the fact too that like when I watched this, I didn't think of it once. I'm like, this movie looks cool.
Yeah.
Where so many animated movies, I guess we'll start here. Where so many animated movies strive for this like glossy CGI sheen. Perifel, the director here, and the legion of animators too. This kind of looks like, this sounds patronizing, but it has like the Saturday morning cartoon feel, but it also has like this 70s noir vibe.
Yeah.
That's really interesting too. Really, because like the sunlight is very overexposed like it is right now in my apartment at the moment because of my cat. And the character designs and like the motivations of the characters, it all kind of goes back to like this film noir style that really plays into this thing super well. And I was really won over in the beginning. The subtle homage to Reservoir Dogs in the beginning, with Wolf and Snake talking in the diner. Wolf voiced by Sam Rockwell, who I think does a great. All the voice actors here do a good job, but I think Sam Rockwell was great.
100%.
Particularly, Marc Maron as Mr. Snake. They're talking in this diner, and it's such an elaborate bait and switch because it's focused on them for so long, and it isn't until they get up to leave that the camera pans, and everybody in the diner is like huddled in fear in the corner. I love the opening scene of this thing, and it feels like a creative revelation. And I mentioned earlier in my review at stevepulaski.com, I mentioned in my review that it might be one of the only animated films this year worth seeing too, given the crop that's out, at least coming to theaters. With all that rambling aside, I'll throw it over to you, Joe. What say you about The Bad Guys?
Yeah, man. I mean, talking about animation movies in general, hold on a minute here. Got a bit of an issue with our... Okay, there we go. We're back. Sorry. Yeah, we disappeared on the stream for some reason nice. When I switched over to me. But yeah, talk about animation films in general. Yeah, this year, I mean, I completely agree with Steve. I haven't seen Lightyear yet, so I won't make any comments on that. But what I have heard, like, it's been mixed. But I can care less about the Minions. Paws of Fury. I mean, Mel Brooks is in it, and that's about what it's got going for me right now. I know, Steve, I think you're more interested in it than I am. And that's really just about it. Turning Red was the only thing, but Turning Red was one of Pixar's direct-to-Disney Plus things, which I was like, man, if this was released in the theaters, this would have been great for Pixar.
Oh, AKA the whole Pixar movie this year that
should have went to theaters, honestly, yeah.
And then there was Apollo 10.5, but that's not theaters
Netflix,
either.
Yeah. So I was like, man, like theatrical releases this year for animated films. I know we have one at the end of the year for Thanksgiving with Strange World with Disney, but we'll see how that goes too. Animation-wise, I was like, damn, like there's really nothing because I was really banking on Spider-Verse, and then Spider-Verse got pushed back. And this just slipped on by. I remember I saw Steve's review of it, and then just word of mouth about this movie kept going around like, man, have you seen this movie? Like, I heard people saying it's good, but like what really sells it is the animation. And finally now, like, it's on Peacock, and even if you don't pay for the subscription service on Peacock, like $5-10 a month, whatever it may be, it is free with Peacock. I highly suggest checking this movie out just solely on the animation alone because, yeah, the animation in this movie is really cool looking. That's the best way to honestly describe it, is it's cool looking. The way the characters' eyes look, their mouths, their eyebrows, how it all just, like, kind of moves The way that they play around with that in terms of like, you know, facial expressions as well as like the characters themselves, like the big bad wolf, the snake, everybody. I'm like, they found like really cool ways to animate their facial features, the way they move. And like, yeah, the backgrounds of this movie too, like Steve was saying, I mean, like they use like this bright light constantly, like for some backgrounds, and it does make it look like this kind of like heist movie like feel, like the Ocean's 11 movie has. And I was just like, man, I'm like, this visually kicks so much ass. This is so cool to look at. I loved all the character designs. I loved the way they, like, you know, they move the animated, like, it looked so unique. And like, to me, it's like, damn it, Universal, why can't you give DreamWorks the same amount of love you give Illumination? Because I really wish this got marketed better, instead of like the Minions being marketed all the way back out in like 2021. And in this, like, I only saw trailers when I went to the theater. I never saw any billboards, commercial ads. And while this movie was like, you know, about to come out, I saw more Minions The Rise of Gru ads and everything. Again, haven't seen Minions Rise of Gru, can't speak on it. I'm just speaking of the past movies of that franchise, and I could care less.
You know what I say about the Minions, though? I used to like Despicable Me, but then I grew up.
We're basically, I just really wish this movie got marketed better by DreamWorks, and I wish DreamWorks really, I mean, not by DreamWorks, by Universal, and I wish Universal really cared about DreamWorks still, because to me, that was the animated studio that put them really on the map with Shrek and How to Train Your Dragon. And it seems like, you know, just because like now these little yellow nutsacks ran around and screamed and yelled and like talked about bananas, they just forgot about them. Dom, what say
Simpsons
you, though?
penises.
There we go.
Dom, what say you?
In the pantheon of the gentleman thief archetype, there are some great stories and even franchises out there, including the Ocean series, the Sly Cooper video game series.
Oh, yes! Dude, there was a
Sly
game that was
Cooper.
reminding me of this, and that was totally it.
Sly Cooper is probably the closest that you can take one-to-one. But for me, I think the biggest influence here, which I guess is confirmed on Wikipedia, which I need to explore the sources on, but Lupin the Third is I love Lupin the Third. That's like one of my favorite franchises of all time, which goes all the way back to the 60s and was built, out of this, I think 60s or 70s. I forget exactly. But that is a fantastic franchise with for a franchise that's been running since the 70s, many low points as well. But, unforgettable characters and archetypes and a kick-ass soundtrack. They've been using that same theme since the 70s, and it does not get old for me. Holy shit. But so much of that I see in The Bad Guys, which immediately biased me in the best way possible, because hell yeah, this movie is awesome. One of the, I might even say the best animated film of 2022 so far, I think. As someone who really liked Turning Red, this beats Turning Red for me. Maybe not so much in its message. That's more of an original message, but just in terms of how the execution of this film and how cool it is and the animation in it, which Joe wonderfully touched on. It's definitely up there for so far. And I don't know what's going to be. I haven't seen Minions yet, but so final judgment, I'll have to wait. But at least according to Wikipedia, it's the second highest grossing animated film of the year. So that's actually good. This is not a bomb.
I knew it was making huge money. I knew that's for sure. And I'm not mad at the idea that we could get a sequel either.
I remember like when it came out at the perfect time. There wasn't a Marvel movie coming out. There wasn't another animated movie coming out for a long time. It came out like during this low period. And I remember like it made like 50 million opening, and then just like each week it was just keeping on raking in, and then like eventually the big releases came out and it left most theaters, but I mean it's still in some of them and still making a ton of money, and Peacock is just taking advantage of it.
Yeah, and why not too? I mean, like I said, it's been a runaway success. I would still say I would put Apollo 10.5 above it. Yeah, I would personally.
Oh, okay, sure.
But no, as far as like, because that's not explicitly a kid movie. It can be, I guess, for like direct, like straight line children's entertainment, like animated entertainment this year. I think The Bad Guys takes it. The one thing I'll
almost
say,
straddles because it's rotoscope.
It does,
it almost straddles the line.
It does, doesn't it? Like it's tough.
I'll concede it's animation. Yeah. Anyway.
Oh, it is animation. It's rotoscope animation, you Philistine. Yeah. But I will say, is before we go to break, the voice acting here is friggin' spectacular.
Yeah.
They have a lot of different voices here. Mr. Wolf is Sam Rockwell, as I mentioned. Mr. Snake is Marc Maron. Mr. Piranha is Anthony Ramos from In the Heights. And I didn't realize that till the credits rolled. That was a nice surprise.
I was really afraid that was going to be
Michael Pena.
What's his name? Say again?
Michael Pena?
No, not Michael Pena. Jeez Louise. The bunny from Pets. No. I'm completely
Kevin Hart?
Yes, I was really afraid it was going to be Kevin Hart and a Kevin Hart style character, but thankfully it actually fleshed out to be
No, he actually became pretty good. Mr. Shark is Craig Robinson from Hot Tub Time Machine, among others. Aquafina is Ms. Tarantula. Zazie Beetz is the governor. And then one of my favorite guys who doesn't do a lot, but I love him as a voice actor, I love him as a screen presence, is Richard Ayoade, who plays Marmalade. Richard Ayoade was he's most probably best known in America, even though I feel like nobody saw this movie, that Ben Stiller Neighborhood Watch movie. The Watch. But he's most famous for the
IT Crowd.
The IT Crowd.
Yeah.
I was trying to remember what country that was. Was that Ireland?
I think
was that Ireland?
That was British.
That was BBC.
Was that British? That was British. Yeah. It's been over a decade since I've seen. I love that show. Richard Ayoade was a big part of that. He plays Marmalade though, and he's got just like instantly recognizable cadence. He's got a really unique voice on top of a last name that I really had to like flesh out to figure out how to say years ago. Ayoade. Even he jokes. Even he says it's just too many vowels. He's like if you count Y, there's only one consonant. But it's a tremendous voice cast too. Awkwafina, and I like Awkwafina a lot too. Awkwafina really gets into like Miss Tarantula as a character, and it really shows too that like all these characters, like they're the actual characters themselves, they all have a purpose. Like they all have like this own like unique qualities to them. Like Mr. Wolf has just this really like cocky gravitas and eloquence about him.
He's George Clooney.
Essentially.
They literally mentioned that explicitly.
Mm-hmm. Miss Tarantula can use all like 8 legs to like work multiple different keyboards, which comes in a really cool hacking scene. Mr. Piranha is very explosive. And even though he's got that like one gag that I got nervous about when they introduced it, that like he can't stop farting, I was like, oh Jesus, this is where it's gonna start to lose me. But like, it's actually pretty effective the way they incorporate it. It's as good as they could have, and it doesn't come off. They don't overuse it either, which I think is a big plus.
Multiple parts of the movie where I was like, oh no, where it's like, oh, they're gonna start singing. Oh, okay. Right, fart joke. Oh, okay. Just stuff like that. And there is one thing that it wound up being like, okay, sure. We should get into critiques later, but I do want to say that real quick. That there are many reasons as to why this movie hit for me, but I think one understated thing is its director, which you mentioned earlier, but I want to understate that he is kind of much in the way that Extraction, if you remember that movie from 2020, Chris Hemsworth, very a forgettable movie, but you'll remember it for its stunt work because it was directed by a stunt man.
Yeah.
Directed by a stunt person.
I know what you're about to say about this, yeah.
And this movie, directed by an animator.
Yeah.
Has not directed anything else, but has been in the game for so long and knows how to, an animator's animator. He knows how all that works. And henceforth, that's why it makes sense that, the animation of this movie kicks ass.
And he's been the lead animator, because I wanted to see who directed this. So I was like, oh, I wonder, and yeah, I saw it. This is the only directing credit. He's been the lead animator of Kung Fu Panda, which, you can say whatever you want about those movies. I love that first one. Never saw the sequels, even though I love the first one. But that first one, I love the animation style they use there, and all the homages they have to kung fu films and all that stuff. And even the trailers I saw with the sequels and everything, I was like, damn, these movies look great. So just again, to Dom's point, the movie, when we get movies like Extraction and John Wick, the reason why action movies like that are so great and they capture general audiences and they end up loving them is they're made by a person that knows the craft because they are the craft.
And if it wasn't such a ass backward way in America where like I always go back to like, you want to know why the education system in this country is so rotten is the members of the Board of Education never taught a student in their life. It's the same kind of thing. You see this with like action movies and animated movies where that they bring in a hired gun or somebody like, I don't want to call anybody out, but like if you know the names, like the directors that you constantly see that seem to just do anything, like when you bring in somebody that actually has, you know, like, actual experience, and Parafo's worked on a lot. Curious George, the Illusionist, which I remember fondly. That came out about 12 years ago. Rise of the Guardians, he was a supervising animator on. He's done a lot, and he's done a lot for a lot of different companies and a lot of different styles. So I don't disagree with that he is a lion's way to the success of this movie, visually and just thematically too.
And that's why I know we got 90 seconds, but that's honestly why I was really safe in saying, yeah, this is heavily influenced by Lupin the Third, because that Miyazaki worked on that. That was his first work. His first movie, feature film, was Lupin the Third, Castle of Castle. I always mess that name up, but it's a landmark movie. It's on HBO Max. Honestly, I think we should, if we have a slow weekend, I'd say we should review that.
I'd be down.